Hello, today we're going to discuss the inner mechanisms of cellular respiration. Okay, so there are three main parts of cellular respiration. They are glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. Glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm and is an anaerobic process. Krebs and electron transport chain occur in the mitochondria, and they both are aerobic. Anaerobic means that the process does not use oxygen. Aerobic means that it does use oxygen. Okay, so the first part, glycolysis. So glycolysis, if we look at our little definition, is the breakdown of glucose by enzymes releasing energy in pyruvic acid, or pyruvate. Glucose is a 6-carbon molecule, and basically what happens is energy is used to break it down into 2 G3P molecules, which are each 3-carbon molecules, and then 2 ADPs are going to pick up a phosphate to make ATPs, and 2 NAD pluses are going to pick up hydrogen ion to become NADHs. When that happens, the G3Ps end up becoming pyruvates. So here, 1 glucose becomes 2 pyruvates. 1 6-carbon molecule breaks down into 2 3-carbon molecules. Okay, next, the Krebs cycle. So one of those pyruvates is going to react with coenzyme A, or CoA, to form acetyl-CoA and carbon dioxide. NAD plus is converted to NADH. So if you look at the very top of this diagram that we have, one of those pyruvates is going to lose one of its carbons to become a carbon dioxide. So we get this acetyl-CoA enzyme that is made up of 2 carbons. Acetyl-CoA moves into the mitochondrial matrix, and then acetyl-CoA combines with a 4-carbon compound to form citric acid. So 2 plus 4 makes that 6-carbon citric acid. Then, as citric acid rotates around, there's a lot of different reactions happening with it. So, when citric acid is broken down, it is going to release 2 molecules of carbon dioxide and generating 1 ATP, 3 NADH, and 1 FADH2. So when those 2 carbon dioxides are released, the 6-carbon molecule ends up becoming 4, and then the ATP, 3 NADH, and FADH2 are generated from other reactions. Acetyl-CoA and citric acid are generated, and the cycle continues. So basically, when that citric acid breaks down into a 4-carbon molecule, that 4-carbon molecule is going to combine with another acetyl-CoA, and then that's going to become citric acid again, and the cycle continues again and again and again. Alright, next is the electron transport chain. So, reading our definition, a group of compounds that pass electrons from one to another via redox reactions, coupled with the transfer of proton across the membrane to create a proton gradient that drives ATP synthesis. So here, looking at our image, we have an intramembrane space and the mitochondrial matrix. So one is basically the cytoplasm, the other is actually inside the mitochondria. Hydrogen ions flowing down their gradient enter a half channel in a stratum, which is anchored in the membrane. Hydrogen ions enter binding sites within a rotor, changing the shape of each subunit so that the rotor spins within the membrane. So there's these precise conformation changes that happen when new molecules enter this motor type thing. Each hydrogen ion makes one complete turn before leaving the rotor and passing through a second half channel in the stratum into the mitochondrial matrix. Spinning of the rotor causes an internal rod to spin as well. this rod extends like a stalk into the knob below it, which is held stationary by the part of the strap. Turning of the rod activates catalytic sites in the knob that produce ATP from ADP and a phosphate ion. So essentially when all these ions go into this complex, there are conformation changes that make this complex rotate and spin, much like a rotor. And there are specific catalytic sites, meaning there's parts of this rotor where reactions happen, and by the time, this thing makes its complete rotation, an ADP is able to pick up a phosphate ion to the ATP, and that energy is used for anything the cell could possibly need energy for. Alright, here we have some GIFs kind of showing everything we've discussed so far. The top left is showing glycolysis. The bottom left is showing the Kreb cycle. The top right GIF is showing the electron transport chain, and the bottom right picture is also the electron transport chain. And then that one little white picture is also the Kreb cycle. Okay, so additional information now. So the net yield from glycolysis, the Kreb cycle, and the electron transport chain is 6 carbon dioxide molecules, 2 ATP, 8 NADH, and 2 FADH2 molecules. That's what you get from going through glycolysis, Kreb cycle, electron transport chain one time. That's the net. Okay. With prokaryotic cells, so some prokaryotic cells perform cellular respiration. Since they do not have a mitochondria, they use their own cell membrane for the electron transport chain. Remember, prokaryotes underwent endosymbiosis to become mitochondria in eukaryotic cells. So prokaryotic cells really are just mitochondria as themselves. Again, when they were absorbed into larger pre-eukaryotic cells, they end up becoming an organelle, but they're not absorbed into anything, so really they're just like little mitochondria. Moving on to fermentation. So what is fermentation? Fermentation is the breaking down of sugar molecules into simpler compounds to produce substances that can be used in making chemical energy. Chemical energy, typically in the form of ATP, is important as it drives various biological processes. Fermentation does not use oxygen, thus it is anaerobic. So fermentation is what happens when there is not enough or no oxygen available, because anaerobic means not using oxygen. So there are 2 different types of fermentation. The first is lactic acid fermentation. So enzymes convert the pyruvate made during glycolysis into lactic acid. Skeletal muscles produce the lactic acid when the body cannot supply enough oxygen, such as during periods of strenuous exercise. This is what makes your muscles really sore and ache. It's that buildup of lactic acid from not having enough oxygen to do whatever kind of work or exercise that your body is undergoing. The next one is alcohol fermentation. This process occurs in yeast and some bacteria. It converts pyruvate into ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. So, in the bottom right picture, you can see kind of the differences between these two. So basically, when we have the pyruvate in lactic acid fermentation, lactic acid is still a 3-carbon molecule. Ethanol and acetaldehyde, yeah. Those are each 2 carbon molecules, and then there's the carbon dioxide also released. So just kind of different reactions happening there.
Thank you for watching. Please share and subscribe, and remember to spread